Hello and welcome to the screencast for 16.1 and 16.2. We'll do both of those sections together on this one. In section 16.1, we're going to look at an outline of the levels of organization of the human body. We're also going to explain how organ systems maintain the homeostasis of the body. So let's take a look at this picture. This is showing you at the chemical level. We've done a lot at the chemical level in the previous chapters we've done in the course. Here are atoms, but atoms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen coming together to form molecules like DNA, glucose. But then all of those molecules come together to form a cell. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes a cell alive a little bit later when we get to viruses and bacteria. However, at the cellular level, when you have a group of cells that all perform the same function, in this case, smooth muscle tissue, this is now the tissue level. So we went from the chemical level here, atoms and molecules, to the cellular level here, then the tissue level. Tissue, all those cells are doing the same thing. That tissue, in this case, smooth muscle, is in this organ, is in the stomach. That stomach is down here, and it's part of a system level digestive tract. So let's take a look at what we have. We have cellular level, tissue level, organ level, system level, and then organismal level. Different types of cells in the body are specialized for specific jobs. So let's take a look. Red blood cells like this carry oxygen. That's their main purpose. Bone cells like this, their main function is to support and help things stand up. Surface skin cells regulate things going in and out of the body. Muscle cells, we know their only job is to contract, and we'll talk more about them. And right here we have a neuron, the nerve cell, and the nerve cell's main function is to carry electricity. There are also four tissue types in the whole human body. There's connective tissue, there's epithelial tissue, there's muscle tissue, and there's nervous tissue. It's important to understand those four and where those tissues show up. So let's take a look at the major human organ systems and their primary function, the way they maintain themselves. The skeletal system provides structure to the body and protects internal organs. The muscular system supports the body and allows it to move. The digestive system breaks down food and absorbs its nutrients. The respiratory system, right here, the lungs, the nasal passages, takes in oxygen and releases waste gas. The nervous system controls sensation, thought, movement, and virtually all body activities. Here's the brain up here, and this is the peripheral nervous system out here, the spinal cord right here. The circulatory system transports oxygen, nutrients, and other substances to cells and carries away the waste. Many homeostasis. Remember, let's talk a little bit about what homeostasis means. Homeostasis is maintaining stable conditions within the human body. And when that breaks down, usually we have a disease. The cells may not be getting everything they need, or there may be toxic wastes. Homeostasis, if it leads to a big enough impulse, an imbalance could lead to death. So take a look at the lesson summary, study that. This was just a brief overview of some of the body systems we're going to look at. That was all of 16.1. We're going to now go to 16.2 and the skeletal system. So let's take a look at some of the lesson objectives for 16.2. We're going to give an overview of the human skeleton, describe the cells and tissues that make up bone, explain how bones grow and develop, and distinguish between different types of joints, and list a few common problems. So I'd like you to take a look at this diagram from your textbook, and everything circled in red, I would like you to know those bones. So the cranium, the lower mandible, this is the upper mandible here, the lower mandible, the clavicle, sometimes called your shoulder blade, the scapula, the sternum right here, your ribs, this bone, the first bone on your arm, one bone is the humerus, radius and ulna, carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges at the bottom. So I'm not asking you to memorize everything, but these major bones I would like you to memorize and know, and this particular diagram will be on the quiz. So make sure you know them. You will be amazed at how many times in your life you'll have to refer to them. Now, a lot of people think that bones are dead dry and brittle, and nothing could be further from the truth. But you can see why people would think that way, because the only bones they see are out in a museum, or they might be some chicken bones lying on the road, and those bones are dead, they are dry, and a lot of times they're brittle. But bones are made of a incredibly dynamic system of tissues. And if you take a look at 16.6, here's the basic structure of the bone matrix, which forms the rigid framework of bones. You'll notice that there's compact bone and spongy, cancellous bone. So take a look, make sure you read this section. I won't expect you to know all these parts, but know that bone is a dynamic entity. So we focus on bone tissues. So bone tissues consist of four main types of bone: compact bone, spongy bone, bone marrow. Now take a look at where the bone marrow is here. And it's important that you know where bone marrow is. That's the soft connective tissue that produces blood cells. Bone cells, incredibly important, but they make red blood cells, which basically feed oxygen to all of our cells. The periosteum, which is a tough fibrinous membrane. So make sure you know those parts and where they're contained. This is a long bone. Let's say this was the humerus in your arm, but as you are smaller and you develop, this bone becomes more and more, not only in size, but also becomes more sophisticated in the type of tissues that it can support. We're going to look at a few of your movable joints now, and sometimes doctors call these synovial joints. And the reason they're called synovial is because the space in between, right here, between this part and this part, it's referred to as not only the synovial cavity, but that's where the synovial fluid is. It acts as kind of a lubricator for joints so that they move nice and slow. If you look at the description over here, a movable or synovial joint is protected and cushioned by cartilage and synovial fluid. Right here, we're going to look at three of the types of joints that we have in our body. Your shoulder is referred to as a ball and socket. The ball is the top of the humerus here into the socket area right over here. Your elbow is referred to as a pivot joint. So ball and socket for shoulder, pivot joint at our wrist, and down here we have a hinge joint. So take a look, make sure you know what parts of the body would have those three types of movable joints. The human skeleton, an adult human skeleton, contains about 206 bones and other tissues. It supports the body, protects internal organs. It produces, as we saw in the bone marrow, blood cells, and it helps maintain mineral homeostasis. Make sure you read the other parts here, but make sure you know that we have about 200 bones in a human skeleton.